The Baltimore Ravens end their season with a thud. We talk about it next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. This podcast is brought to you by OnlineGambling.com, the place to be for all the latest gambling news and tips throughout the NFL playoffs. Visit OnlineGambling.com/NFL to get the edge over the competition throughout this year's playoffs. And we return. It is Monday, the final, in-season Monday of the 2021 season for this show. Is the Ravens could not take care of their own business, and honestly, it wouldn't have mattered anyway because the Dolphins were able to make sure that the Ravens wouldn't get in the playoffs even if they did take care of their business. So the Ravens end their season on a pretty crushing, as it has been over the past month or so, pretty crushing 16-13 overtime defeat at the hands, this time, of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger gets a win in what likely was his final regular season game. And the Ravens end their season on a 6-game losing streak. They started off at 8-3 through their first 11 games and end the year at 8-9. Top of the AFC at 8-3, bottom of the AFC North at 8-9. So, it is disappointing to kind of go through where this team started and look at where they ended. I don't think a lot of people anticipated just the pure speculation of the Ravens losing 6 straight games is unfathomable almost. It has never happened in the John Harbaugh era. And here we go. The Ravens, due to whether it was injuries, COVID, execution, play calling, coaching, the whole shebang, there was a big late season collapse. So we're going to talk about that all here today. And obviously throughout the offseason, we'll talk about the Pittsburgh game though. First, we'll talk about the offense in the first segment, the defense in the second segment, and then kind of get into where the Ravens are going from here, what their plans should be for the offseason, what needs to happen, what they might be thinking, players in draft and everything, free agency trades and all the like. So we'll dive into all that here though. I do want to remind everybody and say thank you for sticking here with me on Locked On Ravens throughout what was a very trying 2021 season. It was exhausting for everyone, the players, the coaches, the fans, the media, everybody who had anything to do with this team. Such a trying season, a cruel season, a brutal one. The Ravens were able to kind of wring some magic from it, but it just wasn't enough. The magic ran out, and so here we are today. But thank you for sticking with me here on Locked On Ravens. This is a 5-day-a-week podcast. It's a lot of work to do this show every single weekday. I love doing it. It's great to talk about this team on the platform that I have. But, a season like this is different. It's different not to see the Ravens making the playoffs and to go on the losing streaks and to not have that magic. So, for everybody who stuck with me during wins and even during losses, it means the world. And I hope that you will stick here with me throughout the course of this offseason, as we are still going to be 5 days a week, talking free agency, talking draft, talking trades, offseason moves, season reviews, season previews. We have the whole shebang here. Still be bringing on guests, still be doing our 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time, still in both audio and video form. If you hear us in audio form, be sure to follow the podcast and turn notifications on. If you hear in video form, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video. It does mean a lot. And we're reaching for our goals here at 1,000 subscribers. We're growing slowly but steadily, and I'm excited about the growth for sure. So do more video stuff in the offseason, more audio stuff. We're still here, Locked On Ravens, 5 days a week. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter at CashTracker34 and the Locked On Ravens Twitter account at Locked On Ravens. But let's dive into this game here. The Ravens and the Steelers, again, a 16-13 overtime loss for this Ravens team. We'll start with the offense, and wasn't a pretty one. The Ravens offense, breaking news here, they missed Lamar Jackson. And, I'm sure that news doesn't shock a lot of people. Surely doesn't shock me. But this game once again showed that Tyler Huntley is a great backup. He is not the starter. He should not be the starter in Baltimore, especially as long as Lamar Jackson is around. I would go as far as say that this was Tyler Huntley's worst performance as a Raven, which is unfortunate coming in the final game against Pittsburgh, 16-31, 141 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions through the air. also had 12 carries for 72 yards on the ground. And Huntley, whether it was just hesitation or whatnot, the decision-making wasn't there yesterday. And it was clear on the interceptions a couple of times there. And he went as far as to explain the Mark Andrews interception where Rashad Bateman had a defender kind of cutting underneath him. But Bateman was open. He ran a great route. And Mark Andrews was the guy that Huntley decided to throw the football to and ended up being an interception in the red zone. And that's another area where you can look at and say this Ravens team just did not perform when it mattered, where they needed to. The Ravens over the final 2 games went 0 for 4 in the red zone in games that were 1-point and 3-point losses. So they're leaving at least 12 points on the board, in combined 4-point losses. You have the 1-point loss and the 3-point loss. So the Ravens settling for field goals in the red zone, turning the ball over in the red zone. It's arguable if they hit on just one of those 4 red zone possessions, or I guess 2 of those 4 red zone possessions, they're in the playoffs probably. And that's just the difference. The Ravens losing 5 of their 6 games by a combined 8 points on that 6-game losing streak. It's stuff like that where they're so close, yet so far away. They play well, then they collapse. And it was, disappointing in some aspects. And I know that, we saw a ton of that Lamar Jackson versus Tyler Huntley debate. And this game, again, goes to show why this Ravens team, I think, is very blessed to have Lamar Jackson and is very blessed to have Tyler Huntley. You have a player and a former MVP, a Pro Bowler, multiple time, who understands this offense, who can run this offense really well. It is high levels, and at the low points, sometimes he struggles. But now you have a backup in Tyler Huntley who isn't perfect, is still learning, but can still come in and at least keep a team competitive instead of, scoring no points whatsoever, although the final 2 weeks on offense were just disaster performances, in my opinion. But you had some positives. Latavius Murray came to play on Sunday. His best performance as a Raven by far. 16 carries, 150 yards, 1 touchdown. That's 9.4 yards per carry. The Ravens as a team averaged 6.9 yards per carry on the ground. I still don't see Latavius Murray back in a Baltimore uniform, but boy, did he audition for some teams, I believe. And you know what? If he's back with the Ravens, he's back with the Ravens. I just view him more as a Gus Edwards type player. And with the Ravens having Gus Edwards back, I just don't think they need to double down on that skill set. I think Devonta Freeman is a much more capable choice based off of what they would potentially need at the position. I could also see them drafting a running back for that 3rd running back spot. I think Justice Hill, his time in Baltimore is probably done. So that's where they are with that. Freeman ended up getting hurt in this game, only had 5 carries for 21 yards. Tyson Williams had a sighting in this one. 1 carry for 4 yards, and Devin Duvernay 1 for 2. Through the air, you had Mark Andrews 8 for 85, Marquise Brown 3 for 27. Could have been a lot more, but he did drop a touchdown in the end zone and also could not hold on to a ball where he toe tapped on the sideline, and Minkah Fitzpatrick came in and jarred that ball loose. And, many people argue, look, if you're going to be a number 1 receiver in this league, you have to make those catches. And I mean, it's true. Marquise Brown knows that he can't be dropping balls in the end zone, and, he has to hold on to those types of balls and stuff like that. But, at the end of the day, the Ravens, it wasn't just Tyler Huntley's fault. It wasn't just Marquise Brown's fault. We'll talk about the defense a bit in the second segment, but Brown ended up getting targeted in this game only 7 times. It was really the Mark Andrews show. Mark Andrews was targeted 16 times in this game by Tyler Huntley. That is a lot of targets for a player that obviously deserves a lot of targets. Don't get me wrong, but it kind of goes back to what we saw in 2020, in 2019, which was, all right, the quarterback is going to target one player, and then the other players aren't going to really get a ton. The Ravens have a lot more talent on the offensive side of the ball, or at least they did in the 2021 season, especially in the pass catcher room. And they did a good job at utilizing it. I think as a whole, when looking at the entire season, and we'll talk about this throughout the next couple of weeks, I think the pass offense did take a step forward. But again, with all the injuries, it was kind of hard to gauge. And James Prochet, another healthy scratch for him. That was another head scratcher for many. It just seems like the Ravens wanted more outside options, more special teams options. Prochet, firmly a slot guy. But, at the end of the day, you want to play players who provide good things in their opportunities when they're given them. And Prochet definitely done that. So we'll see if James Prochet is in the plans for Baltimore in 2022. I sure hope he is. He's a talented football player. But yeah, I know a lot of people were not happy about that James Prochet deactivation for the second straight week. As a whole, I thought the offensive line played fine. I didn't really have a ton of complaints there. I mean, they were going up against TJ Watt. TJ Watt ended up tying the sack record by Michael Strahan. David Sharp had a couple of rough reps, but Patrick McCary was limping in and out of this game throughout the entirety of it. And for what the Ravens have gone through with that position, across the entire offensive line, you have Alejandro Villanueva playing at left tackle. Solid play on the interior with Bradley Bozeman and Kevin Zeitler. But I guess the one big blemish was the Bradley Bozeman snap and Tyler Huntley kind of trying to make a play with it. And because he had the recovery, Huntley had a clear recovery, and he tries to get up and make a play happen. And TJ Watt punches that football out. The Steelers recover, and that's how they get the ball in good field position. So the Bozeman snap kind of flashback a little bit to the Matt Skura era towards the end of his Ravens career, which was not amazing. But I thought Bozeman played solid at center. Kevin Zeitler very solid at right guard as well. So yeah, I mean, the offensive line as a whole played decently well, I thought. I mean, they opened up running lanes, and Tyler Huntley was only sacked 3 times for a total of 9 yards. So it wasn't like, it was awful. He was running for his life a little bit, but, I don't think it was as bad as we've seen in recent performances. So Ravens offense, again, only able to muster 1 touchdown, scoring 1 offensive touchdown in the past 2 weeks, only 13 points total, and it contributed to their Week 18 loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll head into our first break now, though. When we get back, we'll be talking about this Ravens defensive unit, so stay tuned for that, and we will be right back. It's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar, and it makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and they contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Even if you're not a huge fan of working out, you can at least eat something that tastes good and is good for you, and there are so many flavors to choose from. So go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. We're all looking for an edge these days, and I'd like to thank Online Gambling for sponsoring today's podcast. If you don't know already, Online Gambling is a website dedicated to giving gamblers the edge. Throughout the playoffs, they're providing you with the best NFL tips, news, and more to help make your bets as informed as ever. Online Gambling gives gamblers the edge by providing the best and most trusted experience online all day, every day, inspiring every gambler in the world to beat the odds. Don't make emotional decisions with your hard-earned dollars. Make informed decisions with information sourced by experts. Be sure to consult onlinegambling.com before placing your bets. Online Gambling is on a mission to be the best, world's most empowering gambling and betting site, giving gamblers the edge by providing the best and most trusted expert on all day, every day. Online Gambling has inspired every gambler in the world to beat the odds. So go to onlinegambling.com and check out the latest NFL playoff news and tips on how you can get the edge. Visit the website for NFL tips ahead of the playoffs. Visit the website for all the latest NFL news. Make sure you visit onlinegambling.com/NFL for all the latest gambling news and give tips to you the edge throughout the playoffs. Remember, onlinegambling.com/NFL to make the most of this year's playoffs. And we return here. It's our second segment of this Locked On Ravens Monday edition. Kevin Ostreich, your host, still hanging out with you here. And we're still talking about this Ravens Week 18 loss to Pittsburgh in their final game of the regular season, a 16-13 crusher, heartbreaker, as it has been the case over the past 6 weeks on this 6-game losing streak for the Baltimore Ravens. We talked about the offense and Tyler Huntley. In the first segment, we're going to transition over now to the defensive unit, which the story for this defense over the second half of the season, you have a unit that has played relatively well overall, and the point totals that they're giving up in the Lamar Jackson era, and look, granted, Jackson has been on the field for over a month, but in the Lamar Jackson era should be enough to win football games. I mean, even dating back to 2019, you saw this team putting up 50 points and 40 points and 45 points. And this is not the same team as then. There were injuries galore, and that included the quarterback and Lamar Jackson. But I thought that where the defense faltered was in big moments late in games. And, you could talk about that going to week 1. And it wasn't always the case, right? In week 2 against Kansas City, Odafe Oweh makes a huge play and contributes to the Baltimore win. There are many other examples of that. But over the back half of the year, you never really saw the defense come up with big plays in big situations, especially in the past 2 weeks against the Rams and now here against the Steelers. And The Steelers end up scoring that touchdown in the fourth quarter, and then they end up getting the ball and kicking a field goal in overtime for the victory because the Ravens defense just they couldn't stop a lot in the fourth quarter and overtime. And it's unfortunate because I did, again, think they played well for the majority of this game. They ended up limiting the Steelers to 6 of 17 on third down. That's not the best. It's also not terrible. The Ravens, if you want to talk about terrible, went 3 of 14 on third down, which is, not what you want to see at all there. But I think that for what the Ravens did on defense, I mean, Ben Roethlisberger went 30 of 44, 244 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. The run defense, let's start there. The run defense was very good. The leading rusher in terms of actual yards for Pittsburgh was Chase Claypool, who had 33 on 3 carries. Najee Harris had 11 for 28. Benny Snell, 12 for 22. Kalen Ballage, 1 for nothing. And Ben Roethlisberger, 3 for 4. So that ends up being a 2.6 yards per carry average. Baltimore's run defense was phenomenal all season. But, I mean, it's the pass defense that really gave up the big plays late. You see Deontay Johnson make a big conversion. Chase Claypool catch the late touchdown. The Steelers also held the ball for more minutes than the Ravens did. And I know we talk a lot about ball control offense on this show, and the Ravens haven't really had the luxury of doing that because of all the injuries. And the Steelers held the ball for 36 minutes and 49 seconds, the Ravens for 31 minutes and 15 seconds throughout all 4 quarters and, of course, the overtime period. Pittsburgh actually was able to overcome 6 penalties for 43 yards. Baltimore had a good penalty game, just 1 for 5. That's based off what we saw in like weeks 13, 14, 15, that's a big step up. So proud of them for that. But, I mean, all things considered, 314 total yards is not like the defense played terrible type game. I mean, they played well overall. Geno Stone, not just his first career interception. Chuck Clark leads this team with 9 total tackles. There were a couple other things to look out for. I mean, I thought Patrick Queen played a solid game. I'm not going to say great because he did miss a couple tackles. I'm not going to say terrible because he did make a couple of really, really nice plays. But Queen, overall, the recovery, great recovery from Patrick Queen over the second half of the season. You'd like to see him wrap up a bit more. And speaking of wrapping up, there was it might have been a run to Jimmy Smith or a run to Benny Snell on the outside, and Jimmy Smith comes and lunges, throws his body and just misses the ball carrier completely. That was a what the heck are you doing moment. But, it's plays where the Ravens, the tackling issues they had in the first part of the season were just so bad. And then what you have now is a team that, could tackle a lot better. Josh Bynes coming in helped that. You had a couple other great tackles. I mean, Tony Jefferson tackled pretty well, and he was another player who played well overall. I just think that the defense grew as a unit, but the results that we see in terms of final scores are not going to indicate that, and the results that we saw late in games is not going to justify the improvements that they did make overall. And, Pat Freiermuth was the leading receiver for the Steelers in terms of yards, 6 for 53. Deontay Johnson at 7 for 51. I mean, this was not like the Steelers were torching and cutting up the Ravens defense, but again, in the key moments, when it mattered, the Ravens need to stop. The Steelers just kept on pushing, and that is where the Ravens faltered, I think, the most. And Pittsburgh also went 1 for 3 in the red zone, so it's not like they were giving up touchdowns every time Pittsburgh got into the red area. They were forcing Chris Boswell to come on the field, kick field goals, and that's what you want as a defense. But at the same time, you have to convert in the key situations. You have to get stops, get off the field, and even when the offense is struggling, the defense is the unit that has to step up. I thought they did that for the most part, but there were just a couple of areas where you're if there's just not a conversion here, if they're not able to get a stop there, it's just the game and the landscape is so different. You can talk about 4th down with the Rams and that Tavon Young, Odell Beckham conversion. How different would that game have been? I mean, the Ravens would have won it. They would have won it right there. How different would the game be if Chase Claypool doesn't score that touchdown? It's all those different types of things. And against the Steelers team that, was missing, their top running back for most of this game in Najee Harris, who ended up hurting his arm in the first quarter, for a team that couldn't really throw the ball deep as more of a short passing offense, and for a Ravens defense that is missing most of their secondary at this point. I mean, there's a lot that goes on with that, but I think from what you're looking at, the Ravens, they have a ton of different areas to address in the offseason, and part of that has to do with their defense. Who's going to be back? Is it Calais Campbell, Jimmy Smith? I mean, Calais Campbell was sitting on the bench according to Jets Rebeck, and teammates are coming over and consoling him, and who knows what his future is going to be. Jimmy Smith and Brandon Williams and Pernell McPhee, those are the types of players that I think, we're going to look themselves in the mirror and say, is this my time to walk away or is it not? And it's disappointing that they might have to end their careers on a loss as disappointing as this one to a division rival on a losing streak, a season that was as brutal and trying and cruel as almost any that we've seen. It's arguable that this was the most brutal season we've seen from the Baltimore Ravens, just not because of them, but because of injuries and COVID. And a little because of them too. The execution questionable at times, the play calling questionable at times. So we'll see what ends up happening, but we'll head into our final break. And when we get back, we'll expand on our conversation about just where this team goes from here, potential retirements, free agency, trades, draft, and much more. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be right back. Hey Ravens fans, this is Kevin Oestreicher with an incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about and Get Upside. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and use promo code TOUCHDOWN and get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first fill up. That's up to 50 cents a gallon cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get up to 50 cents a gallon cash back on your first tank. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 a month in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash back gets added right to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or any gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get up to 50 cents a gallon cash back on your first tank. That's code TOUCHDOWN. And we return here. It's our final segment of this Monday edition of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. And let's talk about just what the state of the Ravens is. This is a very important offseason for this team, as obviously they just could not get the job done. And as I said right before the season started, injuries would be a defining factor for their 2021 year. Now, it would either be if they were able to overcome them or if they wouldn't be able to overcome them. And obviously, as we're sitting here talking today, they weren't able to overcome those injuries, but they will be getting so many key guys back. And I mean so many key guys back, but they also lost one. They lost one on the defensive side of the ball in Tyus Bowser, who Jesse Rubik at The Athletic reported that the team fears that he may have suffered a torn Achilles in Week 18 against Pittsburgh. And that's just, what a cruel fitting end to such a cruel season. Losing Bowser to a torn Achilles would set him back tremendously. I'm not doubting he can bounce back. I think he can, but, you're looking at a player that it's just unbelievable. We'll probably miss at least the start of the 2022 season because those injuries are not easy to come back from depending on recovery. So Bowser was honestly probably one of the more consistent, if not the most consistent Ravens defender in 2021. The stats didn't always pop off of the screen, but he is so versatile, and that is just, it's a massive, brutal loss. And the injuries for the Ravens 2022 season have already begun, which is just unbelievable. But the positives, the Ravens are going to get back guys like J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, obviously Lamar Jackson, Derek Wolfe, Ronnie Stanley, L.J. Fort, Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey. We'll see what happens with Deshaun Elliott and Anthony Averett and those guys. But, there are even more who the Ravens are missing. Patrick Ricard missed a big chunk of the year. Nick Boyle was never really fully healthy, it seems like, or maybe, over the back half of the year he was, but he was in and out of the lineup for the most part. So with a full offseason for those guys to continue and finish their recoveries and get back on the football field, it will be huge for them to be able to hone their craft a little bit more as they finish up their recoveries, get back on the football field. And I think everybody, who watched this Ravens team can argue and make a very sound argument that, look, it's a what-if scenario. What if these guys were healthy? What if the Ravens were able to do what they were supposed to do this season in terms of staying healthy? And obviously you can't really predict injuries, right? Whether it's preseason, regular season, postseason, training camp, whatever. But, if they were just a little bit healthy, if they had one or two more players, what could this season have been? It was just a full culmination of injury after injury after injury, and they'll be getting those guys back. But, as we kind of hinted at in the second segment there are potential retirements, especially on the defensive side of the ball. What's Calais Campbell's future looking like? Jimmy Smith, Brandon Williams, Pernell McPhee. Those are all guys who could not be with this team next year because they simply just want to step away. And look, I wouldn't blame any of them. It's their decision. If they decide to come back, that's awesome. If they decide to hang it up and take a step back from the game, it's their decision, and I commend them for what they've done, not only in a Ravens uniform, well, for some just in a Ravens uniform like Jimmy Smith, but at the NFL level. So this team could look a lot different. There are rumblings. I'm not saying there's any truth to him or anything, but Marcus Peters could be a cap casualty potentially. The Ravens could be looking to restructure his deal. I'm not, based off what I saw, that's what I've seen. And, the Ravens, I think they should bring Marcus Peters back personally, but we'll see what they end up doing there. Again, Deshaun Elliott, Anthony Averett, Bradley Bozeman, a bunch of other guys, all pending free agents. We'll see who the Ravens can even just afford to re-sign. There's a big possibility that at least one of those three guys will not be a Raven next year because they simply cannot afford to re-sign them. My money would be on Anthony Averett to be the guy who leaves in free agency. I think that the Ravens will probably look to address their cornerback room through the draft and maybe a couple of more budgety type signings. I think Averett earned himself a lot of money regardless of what, his inconsistencies were. I think he earned himself a lot of money on the open market, and a team will pay him that. And I just don't think it'll be the Ravens. I would welcome him back, but at the same time, I just don't see that partnership happening. We'll see, though. Deshaun Elliott, I think, could take a one-year prove-it deal based off the injury he suffered, and his injury history might lower his value. So if he's able to build that back up over a 1 year, prove-it deal, that's awesome. But Brandon Stevens is waiting in the wings, and I thought he played impressive, all things considered, over the course of this season. So we'll see how that turns out. Bradley Bozeman, I'd be a little shocked if they let him walk, to be honest. The Ravens have been looking for a franchise center over the course of the last couple of seasons here. Never really had that player for a while now. And I think that it's time that they kind of pony up the money to a player who's so big, not only on the field for them, but off the field in the community. And I think that's a player that they should look to re-sign. Trades, I mean, the Ravens could look to make one. I wouldn't be shocked if they did. Eric DeCosta is always aggressive, always looking. This team has 10 draft picks in 2022. They hold the 14th overall selection, and they've never held that before. It's the highest since picking Ronnie Stanley number 6 overall in 2016. And they'll have a lot of ammunition to move up, move down, make trades for players and whatnot in this draft. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. And of course, here on Locked On Ravens, we'll be attacking draft season all off season long with, a friend of the show, Spencer Schultz, of course, providing his expert analysis on that. But you're looking at other free agents potentially. I think Devonta Freeman earned a second shot in Baltimore. I think he'd be a great third down back. Justin Houston, I think with the news of Bowser, if that is true, that would be a big signing, a big re-signing for me. I think that would be a player that the Ravens need to prioritize, definitely. A couple of those other guys on one-year deals as well. I don't know if Sammy Watkins comes back. Maybe they just want a veteran in the room and say, look, we're not going to play you a ton, not nearly as much as we did this year in 2021. But if you want to come on, you want to stay with us, that's what the Ravens are saying to him, then maybe it's happening, but I don't know. I think the Ravens, they have enough talent in their wide receiver room to not miss a player like Watkins. Watkins didn't necessarily produce a ton in the second half. In fact, he barely produced at all in the second half. So I don't know if that partnership is going to continue. And coach-wise is one of the biggest pressing debates in Ravens Nation on Ravens Twitter right now. I mean, the Greg Roman dilemma. I have no idea what this team is going to do with Greg Roman. We could all wake up one day and he's gone, or they could just keep him. And there are valid reasons for doing both. I mean, for example, this team had so many injuries in 2021. This team didn't get to see what their offense was like fully healthy. And maybe Roman, based off what we saw earlier in the season with the pass game growing a little bit, the team just says, you know what, we want to see it. If it doesn't work, we'll fire Greg Roman, and that's what it is. But that's really one of the only ways I can see them keeping him. He also has obviously orchestrated some of the best rush offenses in the NFL, and continuity's sake. But it's a question: have the Ravens outgrown him? And is he the right man for the job? It's not easy to replace any coach. I mean, unless they're doing a horrific, terrible job. And look, Roman has had his moments of greatness. He's had his moments of awful everything. So we'll see what ends up happening. But at the end of the day, this Ravens team, very, very, in a state of flux right now. We'll see what ends up happening. But that's all I have for you here today on this episode of Locked On Ravens. Again, we'll be here 5 days a week throughout the course of the offseason. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be diving into more offseason analysis of this team. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.